I saw like this Russian selling Mein Kampf, and I don't speak Russian very well, but all of a sudden all of my Russians started being like, "Нет, это не знаю," like, it felt like crazy.
I saw in the metro, I think, Mein Kampf in Geórgia.
Everywhere, but this was a Russian-only bookstore. Where I was like, why the fuck did you come to my country to sell Mein Kampf? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, we already have our own Mein Kampf, and we have some fucking Russians coming here selling their Mein Kampf. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like,
in Yerevan also I saw 2 Mein Kampfs. What's happening?
Yeah.
well,
I think we can approach that in the interview,
Yeah,
because I think
exactly.
it's going to be really interesting. So. E aí pessoal, tudo bem? Eu tô aqui no último dia de viagem na Geórgia, hoje já é o dia 29 de novembro e eu trouxe aqui uma camarada que trabalha aqui num sindicato na Geórgia pra gente poder dar uma conversada, fazer uma entrevista. Como a Sopo só fala inglês, né? É a forma que a gente encontrou de se comunicar. Essa entrevista vai ser em inglês e aí mais tarde as legendas vão ser disponibilizadas em português. Mas por enquanto essa entrevista vai estar na íntegra para você que entende. Caso você ainda não entenda inglês totalmente, não se esqueça de se inscrever no curso de inglês da October Languages, que não é um parceiro desse vídeo, mas que me ajudou bastante a falar russo para poder viajar nesses lugares. So Sopo, first of all, thank you very much for accepting this interview. There's a lot of people in Brazil that are really interested about knowing the history of Georgia and the former Soviet republics. And I think first of all, introduce yourself. Who are you, what you do? And Rodrigo introduced me to your podcast, or Reimagining the Soviet Georgia. Mm-hmm. And tell us more about this project and why do you thought of doing it? What are your main thoughts about it?
okay, well actually thank you so much for being interested. It's a really huge opportunity for Brazil and Georgia to come together. So my name is Sopo or Sopiko or Sofia Japaridze. I'm a labor union organizer in Georgia, and I also have the Reimagining Soviet podcast. We started doing this because we realized that there is a taboo around speaking about Soviet Union, and everybody wanted to talk about it all the time, but they want to talk about it in private. They're afraid of being shunned by society, and actually most society is not. It's sort of this fear around it. And so this process of realizing that though politically the Georgian government, the opposition, the NGOs, everyone is always trying to implement memory politics against the Soviet Union, people were really into the Soviet Union. So they want to talk about it, they have positive memories, but they're constantly being sort of manipulated into thinking these memories aren't real, or this nostalgia and made to feel crazy. And so this is why I thought this was a worthwhile project to begin. And it's been actually amazing. I've really learned a lot, and also just it seems like it has helped people to feel like, wow, I did have some of these things, I did have some questions, I didn't know about it, and now I'm listening to it. And it's not just a Georgia phenomena, this is a worldwide phenomenon, because our listeners are from all over the world, and they've also just been told that the Soviet Union was, the greatest evil. And so like them being able to actually listen and learn about these different facets has helped them also like open up their minds and realize a lot of the narratives around it were actually the opposite of what was happening. So
yeah, I think that's something that a lot of Brazilians also are affected by, how the historical memories are built in the way of demonizing the road paper that the Soviet Union had on the road on how Soviet Union was a big, bad, evil country. And I think especially after the counter-revolution processes of the 90s, the neoliberal ascension, that kind of memory got stronger during these years. And I think is right now in Georgia, as we were passing by the streets, we were knowing people and we were seeing the signs and seeing the walls. it's really common to see the European community flags and Ukraine flags and a lot of chauvinist messages around all over the country. And it's really interesting to think that, because when we see that how Soviet Union went down during this process, there was a lot of work on implementing this kind of memories inside of the country. So how does the Georgian people right now see Soviet Union and its heritage, its historical not memories, but historical processes, historical, me enrolei inteiro aqui, sorry, just it's a lot of languages to think about in Russian or in English, and neither of them are really good, so yeah, it gets a lot worse. But how the Georgian people sees this memory of Soviet Georgia, and how does this narrative, this counter-Soviet memories were implemented during this 30 years time?
Yeah. So it's right now it's a battle. You know, we are fighting for the memory of Soviet Union, of Soviet Georgia. I would say the latest polls show the favorability towards Soviet Union going up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost half of the people of Georgians have a positive memory or a positive attitude. I don't remember exactly the wording of it in a recent poll. So it's important to first distinguish like who are Georgians. You know, like so Georgians they are based regionally, the city or regions. It's also about poor and rich. It's also about people who have access to European, schools, universities, people who know English, people who know Russian, people who don't speak either English or Russian. So there's all these different ways that you can cut up society and look at it. In general, I would say that people who've had experiences living in the Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm.
who are not the elites who have been benefiting,
Mm-hmm.
have a positive attitude. In my experience, speaking with them, who remember what it was like, have a positive attitude. The ones who do not have a positive attitude are generally who are ideologically very inclined towards hating Soviet Union, who are very much invested in Europe as an EU,
Mm-hmm.
and who also have money coming in from the EU, who have certain benefits from this period, say like they may be able to travel frequently to Europe. They may not
Mm-hmm.
feel the ways that the Soviet Union are missed by other people. So like say, a lot of people miss the Soviet Union because travel was so unrestricted.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the big ones. Being able to fly anywhere. A regular worker could just fly somewhere, This is like those same people, like especially in the regions, I'm shocked, have not left the country since the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine, so we're told that supposedly there was an iron curtain,
Mm-hmm.
that they were locking us up in this area. And then once that was gone, we would open up, right?
Mm-hmm.
In reality, that has actually closed more spaces. It's more a spatial enclosure than it was than the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, before it was like literally you could not leave a certain area, like a huge area. First of all, Soviet Union is huge, so you're not exactly closed in one kind of country. It's an expansive area. But say you couldn't go to Europe and you had to, it was very difficult before Soviet Union. Now you can't go because you can't afford it. So it's like
the freedom,
like
is the freedom of the access of money or the ways to traveling.
Exactly. So even if you could afford to go, it's a foreign system then, So before there was travel, and it was nice because it had common language, so they could immediately connect with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
They had different kinds of travel too, like the ways that people were able to cohere a society, both on a local, national, and Soviet level, were in myriad ways. So you could go because of sports. So you were in sports, say chess club. You got to meet people all over the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc and even sometimes the world, say playing chess in different tournaments.
Mhm.
So you have like instant membership. Or you're a worker, you're going to worker resorts.
Mhm.
You're going to worker resorts, you're going to Sopo, you're going to Crimea, you're going somewhere, and guess what? You're meeting all these different people, you know, Kyrgyz, Russian, Ukrainian, and you're all hanging out. So it kind of did this like friendship of the people,
Yeah.
because it gave them opportunities to interact for long periods, like over a month. It was not even a vacation that was a week long or 5 days or something. It was like longer too. So not only can they not afford any vacations now, but they don't have any connection to almost everyone who's behind us.
Mhm.
Like we were only looking at Europe now, right? It's like every single country or people that are behind us, we no longer interact with.
Yeah.
Like we don't interact with our neighbors, Armenians. We don't interact with Azeris. We don't interact with, say, Kyrgyzstan. We don't interact with Kazakhstan. We don't. The only way we also know Russians are the middle-class Russians who come here and we serve them, which just increases this antagonistic hatred of like, they just come here for tourism, you know?
Mhm.
So even the way we are meeting people is through this kind of hierarchical manner now.
Yeah.
So it's also creates in much more animosity. Even how we know everyone is sort of this hierarchical manner of them coming as tourists. So I think it has not only upended, and people who miss Soviet Union miss it for cheap tickets, they miss it for the cheap food, the healthy food, the free apartments, the guaranteed work. A lot of people talk about full employment all the time.
Yeah.
So there are many ways to miss it, and then there are people who are a little even more conscious. They realize that everyone hates each other now, and there's like wars. We've never had this level of like everyone killing each other, like nations. We see that society is fragile and fragmented. At a dinner table, everyone has different ideas about whatever polarization is happening. They all hate each other. There's now even my family. If you look at it, there's rich and poor now in my family. Well, it was about even before. So there's now, with each other, differences. Sometimes more wealthier family members won't hang out with the less wealthy because the less wealthy may ask them for money now, or something. So it has like destroyed. Should we stop for a second? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Something that I realized when I was walking through the streets of Georgia, but also in Armenia, was how the nationalisms rose a lot after the fall of Soviet Union. We were talking about back in Yerevan about the Nagorno-Karabakh war that stood like still during the Soviet Union, and just a moment before it fell down, the war went down, and there's a lot of conflicts going out right now. And we were talking about when we arrived here near the office, we were talking about how the transportation system is very precarizado.
Overcrowded.
Yeah, it's overcrowded. There is a lot of waiting lines. We got here by subway, and we saw all the structures falling down because there's a lot of the common sense in Brazil that I think is a worldwide phenomenon, thanks to the cultural war during the 80s, that everything in the Soviet Union was a thing that not worked properly. Like it was really lack of products and really lack of everything that commonly we say that is normal in capitalism. But just like I said, I think it's very important for us to hear that right now the people in Georgia, but also, and I think it's a phenomenon that I talked to Rodrigo once, that I thought that the countries that we consider peripheral in this region, like beyond Russia, suffered a lot from the fall of Soviet Union, because we were talking that after December 25 in 1991, the electricity just went down in Armenia for a lot of years. The gas heating as well. So I can see that even though right now we see all these advertisements, all these products, all this, it's kind of weird, to see these historical buildings transformed into a chips propaganda, you know, like a propaganda of soda. So I think is a different way to think life. So I think that's why we in Brazil or in other places we don't feel that much pain, or we can't do this click, you know, about how people miss these places or how they miss these places. Because as you said, people were like, oh, Soviet Union was bad, was really bad, was awful. But I think for the past 5 years or 10 years, more people got interested about knowing that history, because it wasn't possible that it was that bad. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that they're missing what's about it, you know. So I think it's very important, and I think it's very important also to think about how these countries like Georgia, Armenia, or Azerbaijan, or other countries from the Eastern Bloc, they all got swallowed by the international capitalist system, you know, like in creating a more depending relations, you know. So, for example, in Brazil, right now the government are really enjoying the fact that we are sealing deals with European Union, and we're sealing deals even with the BRICS to try to get some autonomy. But these deals actually make our dependence relation deeper, because Brazil is going to export soy and export cow meat to worldwide, and that will maintain the farm structure, that will maintain the great property structure. So I think it's very important for people to understand that in Soviet Union we had this integrated economy, like this integrated relations that, as you said, it was depending on everyone's collaboration or everyone's roles in the organization of the country to make the country work. So right now, as we can see, I don't know what's the main development of Georgia's economies. I really don't know, but I believe, just like mailing Brazil is the services. How does the Georgian economy or the Georgian common life, got after the fall of Soviet Union? Because I think that's a very important thing, because to people understand what changed before 1991 and after it.
That's a really important question. So this actually goes back into why the metros are overfull and so on, is because there used to be local economy, so you didn't have to move to the capital. So that's one of the things about capitalism is it's very centric, of a city-centric. So there's always like a metropole, and the rest of the region usually suffers, you know. And so Soviet Union didn't do that. They had everywhere, at all levels, you know, universities, schools, different production sites, agriculture, you know, industry, so on and so on. So you didn't have to move to Tbilisi, the capital, to be able to be employed or go to school or trade school or university. You had something regionally, or hospital. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, pretty much everything regionally in infrastructure has collapsed. Production has collapsed as well. It was, our industry fell probably, I don't know, insane amounts. Like most of the industry was wiped away one day, and it was sold for scraps. Like people were so poor, they just took down the factories, and the directors, people who like bought them up through this. Anyway, so it's a whole privatization scheme that happened, that people had supposedly a share of the company, but they were so poor they sold the shares for like sugar and bread. And so these people like just took advantage of them and then pretty much dispossessed them. Every kind of so-called giving back to the people failed, and it was just, this is an oligarchy sort of were created by these like privatization schemes. And so you have most of the things collapse. Then what happens? You have to go to the city to get a job. So everybody starts moving here. The city cannot handle these many people because it was built for a certain amount. And then since really the end of the Soviet Union, a lot of things weren't built. all of our metro, one station was recently added, but everything was already made during the Soviet Union before they finished it. So they cannot actually expand the metro, despite the fact that it's necessary. The buses are almost always packed, problematic, they can't afford to have a more extensive kind of bus and marshrutka and so on networks. There's a pressure on the city, pollution goes up, tons of buildings are built everywhere because housing, not only is it housing is important, but also this drive, because there's no jobs at home in villages and in towns, it also created migration.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the EU actually giving it 2017 having visa liberalization has pushed a lot of migrants, especially women, into working in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Before, most of the migrants actually still the most money comes from Russia. So the first wave and continuous wave go to Russia. A lot of men actually send remittances from Russia because they can make money doing whatever other things. Most of the migration go to Europe is women who are care workers. I mean, really, like indentured servant conditions, like horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Their thing is, most of them have been actually dispossessed from their homes, like they had to sell their homes or they got mortgaged and they were evicted because they had no money. So their whole thing is, we have to go there, save money, buy a house. And then they buy a house or buy an apartment from working there. But then they also are like, well, what am I gonna do if I retire? Or what is my son gonna do, or my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing there, like nothing where to work. Where are they gonna work? So they buy a second or third home as a profit making, like a rented out, to be able to secure money for when they retire or for their children.
Mm-hmm.
This drives the constant needing to make, build houses everywhere and more deregulation and so on. So it's all contributing to a very unhealthy sort of economy in general. Most families have remittances, somebody from their family sending some kind of money. So the wages don't always reflect maybe household income because they have wages also coming in from remittances, either Russia or Europe. So what is the economy? It's mostly, almost all the kids have worked in supermarkets. They're open 24/7. Markets.
I've seen a lot of those younglings. I mean, young adults who wearing those delivery packages.
That's another thing. Courier workers. That's huge, and I'll get to that. Then we have pharmacies. One of the probably most densely pharmacies per square kilometer or something. Like it's just really dense everywhere. People are sick, and there's tons of pharmacies. There's a few industries left, like gold and copper. Those places, they used to have other industry. All the under industry were killed off. So the towns are like only mono industrial places where they're constantly susceptible to market changes and ownership changes. So right now, there's two different times where the miners, the manganese miners were left out of jobs because all of a sudden manganese was falling down too fast on the world market. So of course the bosses try to hoard to make sure the manganese prices would go up. So then they got employed. So they're very vulnerable, let's say. That's one of our things that we still export. So we don't really have a lot as far as like we have some raw materials, not a lot of industry, and then we have some wines and so on, and some agricultural. If you look at statistics, supposedly most people work in agriculture. This is a lie, because in Georgia, if you have like a little plot of land, you are considered employed in agriculture. So they do this to make the unemployment look lower, because the unemployment would be much higher if you actually showed the real figures. So when you have such high employment, all of a sudden Glovo, Wolt and so on, all these different companies come and they can find tons of men especially employable, And so comparatively, even though the salaries are quite low to other jobs like working in a supermarket, it still pays more, even though their hours are horrible, and they can also die on the road and get sick and get hit by a car and they might not even get any help from the company. So not a lot of industry really, not a lot of, the economy is quite weak. It's reliant on remittances. It's reliant on market forces, and then also just it's reliant on solidarity from friends and family. You know, like it is family that continuously gives and takes care of each other, and really because the social state is completely collapsed. It's been collapsed for 30 years. We don't have a minimum wage. We don't have unemployment. We don't have, you know, occupational health and safety long term. I mean, we just have occupational health that just recently came, but not like long term. So like occupational medicine, like if you get disease after working 30 years, you need somebody to say that you got this disease, say from working in a mine. We don't have anyone to do that. No one has a legal right to do that. So who's gonna take care of them? Oh, the family. What's the family gonna do? Send someone to work in Italy to pay for this company's, you know, horrible practices that is sick now, is their husband or their son or whoever. 2 women we interviewed in Italy, one woman said that her daughter's husband died from falling down off a building, and another one said that the reason she had to come to work in Italy was because her son, who was the only bread, the bread maker in the family, who went and brought in, you know, food, money, was electrocuted during construction. His entire body was burnt up, and also the company did not pay for his expenses. So she, at 55, not knowing one word of English or Italian, they sent her off to make money and send back home because he has 2 kids, you know, a wife, and so on. So these are the stories. You know, these are the kinds of complexities that we face in post-Soviet world. And then they tell you on top of this that you're crazy for not loving this. Like, you know, and and you're like, I remember the Soviet Union. We were all together. I saw my family. We had a home. We had not only one home, but we had like vacation homes. We remember being able to party for 3 days straight. Remember having huge weddings. We remember all these things, right? And they say, no, that was a totalitarian state. You were horrible. And then it doesn't make any sense. Like we've done interviews where people will tell me what a great life they had for like 9 pages. We're like writing, what a wonderful life. Every possible way. And then they're like, I guess it was dictatorship though, right? Like clearly this is like something else that they put on top of this, you know, to make them like hate this. And then if you say like, hey, I miss the Soviet Union, they used to call you your like some kind of a grandmother sentimental for her youth, you know? Oh, this is such nostalgia. We all have nostalgia. And then some people will be even really cruel and say, I hope this generation must die off for us to become truly European. Because this old generation just ruins everything, you know? And they hate them because they have memories, you know, that they will not give up because they remember that they had a better life. I had a woman come during May Day. We had a May Day protest. This woman came, she was older, and she said, you're a union? I said, yeah, we're a union. She goes, they still exist? I said, yeah, of course we exist. And she said, can I go somewhere to rest? She's like, I haven't had a vacation in decades. Can you have, because unions used to be able to send people to vacation, you know? She said, can I please have one time I can go? And I'm like, I'm so sorry, we don't have that kind of money. We're not like a union of the Soviet Union. But this is the reality. Like most of these people have never set foot. They remember being able to vacation every year, not just once, maybe twice. And then now they cannot. I went to another asylum. It's this like place where it's a resort. You drink these drinks if you have problems. You know, it's like a health resort. And I went to this woman, and she said, "Oh, you have to drink these drinks for 10 days straight, but you have to be there to drink them." I was like, I can't afford 10 days here. And she's like, I was like, who can afford 10 days? And she's like, I know, no one can afford it. But the minimal treatment is 10 days. So you have Soviet Union level of minimum 10 days. You need to stay for like 30 days to get this treatment. No one can actually afford 10 days there, you know, 2 or 3 days maximum. And this is like crazy, you know, like you have this one thing acting like everyone has money, everyone has these abilities. And in reality, you don't have any of it. So it's just, and even like hospitals, right? Like I always bring this example of it. People don't really seem to realize that hospitals everywhere are closed. You have to travel maybe 2, 3, 4 hours to a hospital, like a hospital that you need for certain, more complicated processes. One miner who's in Ibuli, he was a detonator. He detonated the mines, opened them, blew them up, and it went wrong. And he said he doesn't have a hand. It exploded in his hand. His hand was blown off, and he waited 45 minutes for the ambulance, just the ambulance, to get there. And it took him like hours to get to the hospital. And he said he was just standing there with a blown off hand. I mean, this is crazy.
That's
this would never
normal.
happen.
Yeah.
This would never happen in the Soviet Union. Or just like even areas where there was a mining accident in the 1970s in the coal mines. And they realized this area where the accident happened and killed people were so dangerous. Well, they went in and they sealed the whole thing off, and they said, never go there. This is a dangerous part. But apparently it's it has a lot of coal, but it's dangerous because it's explosive. I don't remember exact details why. Since then, they unsealed it because it was easy, to get them. There's been multiple accidents blown up.
Yeah.
And all the miners will say, this was closed off. They keep taking us into these very dangerous places, despite the fact they're killing people. And they force them. They're like, if you don't go in, we'll fire you. Of course, it's like, and the ones who survived were the ones who disobeyed. Literally, this one guy was like, I'm not gonna go in, and he was like being threatened that he was gonna get fired. He's like, I don't care, I'm not gonna die, and he survived, and all his friends died. And this is like the health and safety that's happening now. It's like if you risk it, if you're like, no, I'm not gonna do it, I'd rather just starve to death. But they know that this is a dangerous area, and they're still sending in people because there's no one to control this, no one to monitor this, and now whoever owns the coal mines, they don't care about safety. They just want their money quick. All these miners to them are nobody. He'll die, we'll just bring another one. They're so desperate.
There's so many people available, so it doesn't make a difference.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, in Brazil we have.
I sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to thank Sopo because Gustavo these days published a video on Sao Paulo, and the senators and the Brazilians couldn't believe. They thought it's not true that he's lying. That those senators were for
elites.
Elite.
Yeah, they always say that.
People were, and you are now telling us how it really worked, and people in Brazil, they don't believe us. They think we are crazy or...
Seriously, people outside of Georgia won't believe you because...
Well, in Russia, they know how it was, but outside of the Eastern Bloc, people don't believe. And also, just a note, you saw yesterday Mimino, this small village with a chopper going all the time, and now people can't get urgent treatment for
blown off hand. Yeah. I think they did their job really well to implement those kind of memories in the people, and I think to manufacture this, because we saw all of this cultural creation and it's basically a lie. So I think it's very interesting to see how this cultural and ideological phenomenon was applied especially in the countries that were in influential areas, so overly Europe or United States. And I think it's really something to hear that, because when we think in Brazil, for example, we also have a lot of mining activities, and we also had a company in Brazil which is called Vale, and is a company known. It was privatized during the 90s, and also a lot of accidents happens and a lot of natural devastation happens. And we had these two big accidents in two cities from Minas Gerais that is called Mariana and Brumadinho, and all the area of the garbage from the mining process, all the mud, all the infected water after the processes, all these barriers, all these dams got collapsed, and all the lower parts of the cities were simply driven by the water, and a lot of people died and nothing happened. to the company, especially because, as you said, when we are thinking about this structure of how these countries became commodity exporters, and so it doesn't matter the safety of anyone. It doesn't matter how if someone's gonna get their lives ripped off from her, because what the main objective is the profit. So I think it's very symptomatic that we see in a country like Georgia or Armenia or other countries around this area, how all their services, all their basic rights, we're not talking about services, we're talking about rights. I mean, the basic ones, they all got collapsed. And I was talking to Rodrigo how bad it was to see very old ladies in the subway station selling things. I mean, people that are clearly working in a very advanced age, and how is weird to see at the same time in a Soviet cultural production like Mimino, this kind of thing, a chopper with a projector, taking movies to people watch it, to people enjoy it, you know. So it's really weird, you know, to talk to someone about it, and all the people say no, it's a lie, because all the Hollywood industry, because all the cultural thing told us once upon a time that the Soviet Union was really bad, or
the Soviet filter.
Yeah,
like everything's dark.
yeah, like blue, you know. Everyone's sad. It's always rainy, always snowy. Exactly. Like,
I mean, you know, also talks a lot about corruption, daily corruption, and I mean, it openly talks about it in a movie. We think about censorship, about depicting the Soviet Union as an ideal place. The whole movie is about favors people are doing each other, and well, life is like this, and they showed it.
It's amazing to see how this kind of content is important for us to break these barriers, you know, because there's a lot of people in Brazil that are getting interested, but that's the problem. They don't even know how to start, because all the references, all the literature, all the culture, everything points out to understanding Soviet Union as a historical process, as an historical experience, you know, with maybe its problems, with its difficulties, but I think much better than what we see now.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely. Not even comparing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think a very sorry. Please.
Yeah, no. I have this fight with my aunt. She's 86, and her version of capitalism is like this rosy version. Like when I talk to her, I'm like, you clearly don't understand capitalism. But she's like 86, and she's never had to pay for rent. You know, she's never had to worry about paying for rent. So we're arguing all the time, and she really has such privilege that she cannot quite comprehend how callous capitalism is. Like, I find it that problem is that really most Georgians who've had this experience, who may be anti-communist, like my aunt, just can't understand how cruel capitalism is, because they don't understand the levels of cruelty that one can be. Like, I find it that Soviet Union government was actually very responsive often to protests. Anytime, there's always like this things like every time we protested, we just got whatever we wanted, you know? So there's this like idea that, you know, if you even now, like if you protest, like you should just get whatever you're demanding, you know, because a lot of it came from the Soviet Union, like especially during the Perestroika period, you know, they're like, this dam should not be built because this is the industry that's going to whatever benefit Russia or something, you know, and then they'll say, okay, and they'll just like drop the plans, you know, there's like a hunger strike, they would just drop it. And so there was just like a responsiveness too, and despite the fact that there was real like problems within the Soviet Union, there's not a lot of like, in everyday manner, most people were like not affected, you know? It's like in the US, problems that, if you're an immigrant in the US, you have insane amount of barriers and problems. If you don't have, say, papers, you're undocumented, you're this or that, you have a lot of problems. A regular American who doesn't have these problems would never understand your problems, right? You couldn't say that most Americans are undocumented and have all these problems. They're unaffected by, say, this small amount of people that are facing problems. Say, Soviet Union, and sorry, what if, say, Soviet Union was still alive, existed, and all we ever did, was give only every single person that had a problem in the US, like an undocumented person or anybody else, black person, Mexican, whatever, somebody, unless you're white middle class, take one person and only take those stories and put them everywhere, make them required reading in every single high school, middle school, everywhere. You're going to have a version of America that's only from a certain perspective that's actually quite minor in the larger scheme, right? So what happened with Soviet Union was they would take these very, let's say, outliers, that most people did not have these experiences, but they would take these outliers and they would give them huge platforms, citizenship, this and that in the West, treat them like gods, get their books everywhere, make it mandatory reading. So then your perception of the Soviet Union is very, very much skewed. And of course, America is actually quite horrible, but it's also, if you are a middle-class white person living in a certain area, your life is definitely going to be much better.
You're not affected by those.
You're not affected by half the, that's the problem, telling a story from a certain perspective. So this is the problem with that. Most of the winners were the elites, right? So when you have dissidents, if you like everywhere else in the world, who are the fighters? Who are the protesters? What do they look like? Which class do they come from usually? Or what color of skin? It's usually people who are demanding their rights. Well, nowadays it's mostly the white men, but but there was
poor white men, always so oppressed by historical issues.
But this is the thing now. But this started in the Soviet Union. It was like, who's fighting in the U.S.? It's Black Americans, it's women, it's whoever fighting for their rights, right? It's the dispossessed, disenfranchised people who are asking for citizenship rights, right? Some kind of inclusion. Who are the dissidents in the Soviet Union? What was their makeup? It's like nuclear physicists, had insane, elite cream of the cream, creme de la creme of society are the freedom fighters. Like, where have you heard in any world where the elite, almost the aristocrats of Soviet Union, are the freedom fighters, right? Yeah. So you didn't have Joe Schmo, regular people saying Soviet Union's horrible, let's destroy this. Yeah. No, you have very high-ranking people who usually had whatever happened, they didn't get farther than they wanted or whatever it is that their motivation was. And most of the time it's those stories. They defect to the West, they write a book, that book becomes #1 bestseller, that book becomes required reading. And then you have things like George Orwell's books, which became very famous and they tried to make this, as most people I think know the Soviet Union through 1984. I'm convinced that George Orwell, Animal Farm, is the way they understand the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I think I think it's amazing to see. Just a note, is amazing for me as a historian and also as a reader to see how people try to make a fable about animals to try to explain an historical process. I mean, it's really amazing how they perceive the culture and also how they sponsor it to it, just like I said, for example, we got this very famous book which is Gulag Archipelago, which is Rodrigo, I never read, and I think I'm okay with that. But Rodrigo told me, and a lot of analysis, that the book is really awful to understand this process because it was written by an anti-communist person and also someone that, as you said, not the factor, but ran away to the West and got sponsored, and it was treated like a god, you know.
Guy
And
was
it was a
ultra-right,
I was gonna say Russian nationalist,
chauvinist,
yeah.
extremely anti-Semite. It was the worst of the worst. The
Yeah.
Black Hundreds writing a book, and the guy got a Nobel for it.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's really interesting hearing you on this perspective, because you're right. I mean, when we are talking about the free world during that time, all the people that were protesting against this free world were the Black Americans, were the immigrants, were the women, the Native Americans, and everyone that was suffering during the system and got exploited by it. And also, we don't see that very much in Soviet Union, especially because we are not talking about the people that see Soviet Union as a bad place to live. It's exactly the members of the small bourgeoisie or small groups that ascended economically. And I don't know, I think they saw the possibilities of being very wealth and very successful in the West, and that served as a glove, as a propaganda.
Absolutely. And the thing is, for them, the Soviet Union was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, they could do better under capitalism,
Yeah.
because the elites and the rich can do. That's the whole point of communism, right? It's because we know that the rich can have a great life, but we don't want to suffer while they have a great life, right?
Yeah.
So they're totally fine with us suffering as long as they have a great life, you know? So, of course, I mean, most people who are, the victims of communism are the ones who hate communism. A lot of them are, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to have a, ethno-nationalist state. I'm sorry that this was pushing you to be, multicultural and have a different project. Like, I'm sorry that you wanted the rich people to be even richer, and, that was not possible. Sorry about that. Like, what are the grievances? Let's look at the grievances, And it's like, these same people who, for anything, they're like, oh, it was like you could go to prison for speculation for this. Yeah, you could go to prison for cheating and lying to the people. Like,
wow,
these are
that's
the same
really bad.
people who are like white-collar criminals under capitalism, stealing from the poor, who are fine with it. Like, they're the same people who will lock someone up for stealing bread now. The same people that complained about the Soviet Union being somehow so, like, whatever, put everyone in prison that did something bad, which isn't true, but still, even if it was, are the same people that would lock everyone up for the smallest thing.
Yeah.
They're the ones who want tough on crime every time. It's not people like me.
The three-strike policy is in the
Yeah,
90s.
zero tolerance here. Also, we had zero tolerance. They locked everybody up for the pettiest things. So it's now my aunt who comes, she goes, if you steal 100, they'll put you in jail, but if you steal 1 million, nothing happens to you. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. Like, but she thinks this is because it's like, oh, this is still a Soviet mentality or something, And this is the problem. Like, if you look again, there will never be a place, there will never be such a world. Communism will never mean that both rich people can be happy and poor people can be happy, as long as they think in these categories of like, only for me and only for, for my family. Like, communism does mean that we must oppress rich people in the sense that take away their wealth. Like, we should not have wealthy people and call that communism, Like, we even like the nomenclatura, like they say the elites in the Soviet Union were so elite. Okay, even if we take that, my grandfather was like a polkovnik, like a colonel or something in the KGB. Like, see his house. Like, I don't see how this is like in any way. It was like a little. It's like a little apartment in maybe a nicer, as in like downtown area, but like not even close to where people who work now, any of the government or businesses live. They live in huge mansions now. Like, my grandfather lived in like a 3-bedroom apartment, like barely staircase that will look wobbly that you could die on, like this is the nomenclatura. It's like we had a little bit of vacation home, which a lot of people had, in different areas. So it's like if you look at like, see how you live more privileged, well, let's compare the levels, you know? Even if you had some hierarchy, and so you never said that they had achieved full communism, it was more like we're getting there, right? Even if you had that, the difference between a worker and say nomenclatura was so much less than it is now between a worker and any CEO, any government. I mean, it is day and night now, you know? So it's not, they got every single freedom while workers just went down and down and down. And this is supposed to be freedom. Freedom for what? And twofold, you know, Marxist sense freedom is twofold. You are free to die on your own, right? Like, you are free in that sense. You are, you know, taken away from any kind of, you don't owe anybody anything, you know, you're free in that sense. And you're free to work, that's what it is, and you're free to die, you know, like that's real freedom. And so this idea somehow is embracing of this so-called freedom is from the beginning false. Like as a communist, as a socialist, as a leftist, you should be always questioning any kind of freedom narrative. It is almost always right-wing. It almost means freedom for slave owners, you know, it means freedom for capitalists. It never means freedom for the people. And democracy always means to them, I used to never understand why democracy was always like, I believe in democracy, like I'm always fighting for more democracy, like democracy at the workplace, democracy, you know, like in local leagues, we're all locked out from all these decision makers, like corporations aren't democratic, right? But if you look at what they really mean by democracy, almost always just means no regulations, that the poor people can never really hold the rich people accountable, and there's no one to actually who can come in and do that, because they can then get somebody else who has more money, who can always try to, you know, get more votes, who can destroy the opponent, who can come in and keep going and keep pressing the, you know, in our case, like a comprador class, where we just like sell off everything, and this is what they call democracy. So if you ask people, they'll say they don't like democracy, and it's not like the democracy of like how I understand social democracy, of everyone having a share, but they don't understand, they think of democracy in a real way. It's what's really been. Democracy for them means being poor, having no power, you can protest all you want, it doesn't mean anything, you know, you have zero ability to influence anything above you, no one listens to you, and then you have political parties, none of them, not a single party in Georgia ever talks about poor people, ever talks about economic rights, unions, you know, a good day for them. The only thing they ever talk about is sell more of our resources or sell less, sell it to the Russians or sell it to the Europeans, sell it to the Chinese or sell it to Scandinavians. This is the difference between the parties. And of course nobody believes in democracy, you know? It's not because they're undemocratic or they don't believe in like participatory or more popular movements, because the only way they've understood democracy has always been equal to capitalism. Capitalism and democracy in their eyes have always like are equal to each other. So when they have these tendencies to, then, you know, they don't want to, they're fine with saying one party being in power for a long time, because they're like, what is the difference, you know? You make us vote, you make us do all this stuff and nothing changes. It just like bothers people at this point. Like what, you know, if it's gonna be Peter or Paul, they do the same thing. Who cares, right? None of them care about our normal like life. And so when you tell them, even like we were discussing recently, and some of the workers said, oh, I remember my grandmother being elected locally to represent my village in some kind of, I don't know, council in the Soviet Union. And then we could like, they could talk about the needs of the community, and there were representatives. They can't imagine anything like that now. So even on a local level, they had these mechanisms of electing and representation. Even like, my friends used to do this. They used to give some kind of Tbilisi award every year, like a badge of, like a medal or something, to someone like special, Tbilisi award, I think it's called. And they looked at all the years who received the awards, and there was a huge difference between everyone from 1990 to post 1990. Workers, single moms, women with many children. These are the ones who got the medals in Tbilisi. Do you know who's after? Businessmen. Businessmen. So you have the shift even with just a stupid award, that it was regular workers receiving it from some special thing they did or whatever, and now you have only businessmen who are receiving it, and some kind of politicians. Every level, no one is getting, there's no acknowledgement of their work, there's no acknowledgement of how, like, them having a profession or doing anything. You know, just people need to feel like they're part of a society, someone recognizes them as a member, right? Could be in this place or that place. Nothing. You are nobody now. Nothing. No awards for you, no vacation for you, you know, like nobody cares. And everybody's too busy to even care. We were joking, I tried to have my birthday party and I was looking at the prices. I was like, oh my God, it's so expensive, you know, what would I do? And my friends were like joking, like, you think you're gonna have like a big party? You know we don't do that anymore, right? Like, no one has big gatherings anymore. I grew up Soviet Union where we had 2-3 day weddings. We had huge tables where everybody was welcome. Supra was full from here to here with food. No one can afford that now. And one of the saddest things is, like, a lot of the older women, because it's like a Georgian tradition. If you go to someone's home, you bring a chocolate or a gift. It's like they feel embarrassed. They don't have money. And they can't go somewhere because they won't have a chocolate or something gift for them. And the other person may feel embarrassed that they're too poor to renovate their home, so they don't invite anyone. And so even socialization has collapsed because people don't have the money to feed each other because of this, like, you know, no, it's hard to say, like, oh, don't worry about my house falling apart. It's like, oh, don't worry, don't bring anything, right? Nobody will mean that. So because they have some ideas of how to, you know, what's the word, interact before, those are gone. Like, socialization has also suffered. And so, like, people are lonely, so lonely. Even, like, I have so many examples, but, like, I have a woman who cleans our house, like our office, and she always talks. She loves the Soviet Union, and her daughter. She's like a 25-year-old daughter, and she's always like, I feel so bad for my daughter. She says she's a horrible youth. You know, there's not a lot of places she can go. She's no money, you know, not enough money to vacation. She doesn't get to go to many places. Doesn't have a lot of friends. And she's like, my youth was spectacular. No one ever had any money, but we'd always be able to go everywhere because we would just be welcome to go. She's like, we would just literally just like hitchhike to the nearest village, just hang out. People would just receive us, you know. We would have dinner with them, like no money really. Just you could just do it. Tons of friends everywhere, like so much social cohesion. Every level you can make friends, you know, from as I said, like sports to going to something with school. Like you had your school cohort that did everything together, vacation together, sightseeing together, doing this together. Just random spontaneity was much more common. Being able to just take off and do whatever you want, you know, not a lot of consequences for that, you know, not needing a lot of money for that. My mother could take off to go to Tashkent at one day. She's like, oh, my friend called, gotta go. You know, she could just literally buy a ticket and go to Tashkent. It was just easy, it was cheap, spontaneous. You had people with free time in the sense that they weren't worried about their next meal. They weren't gonna get fired from their job if they missed a day, you know? Somebody else could take over. So it's like freedom in the sense that they had more personal freedom. Now, did they have Chanel number 5? You know, did they have, I don't know, the latest H&M trend? No. But who cares, right? And now we know now that this stuff is killing our planet, overconsumption. No one should be, also choices of all this stuff, you know. And now we have all this H&M where you can order whatever. People still look the same, first of all. They were like, oh, they dress the same. Honestly, they look the same. Everyone's wearing the same thing, you know, no matter how many stores and colors they change. And most people can't afford it either, you know? And now it's like, before, like, my mom used to take me as a kid to the tailor and I would design my own dresses as a kid. I was obsessed with this like one style, so I'd always like choose this. And so I was involved in designing my own dress, and then Taylor would make it for me, specifically fitted for me. Okay, and it took me then to Gap in the US when I moved there, you know, and of course it's okay, nice, Gap, whatever. But like, I remember the specialness of me designing my own clothing with Taylor more than I remember, you know, more than buying anything at Gap. No?
Mm-hmm.
So
it was more, it's amazing to see how this was more, how in nowadays capitalism, I think they sell the idea of being different, and that's exactly what makes the market rolls on, is the idea of being different, not having your own freedom, so everyone can get delusional about consumption, about all those things that give you some specific characteristics, a specific way to live your life, or a specific way to be yourself, you know. And I think is very close to what we see right now in Brazil, because it's amazing, not amazing in a way that's cool, but I mean historically thinking, how the problems that we're talking about in Georgia also happens in Brazil, about the loneliness of the youth, the unemployment, the lack of perspective. I mean, all those things that are making the processes of exploitation grows and grows and grows, and we don't see any hope. And that's why in Brazil we also are having our time on hating democracy, because of course no one likes this shitty democracy, because in the end of the day we are defending a completely failed model, a model that to keep it itself alive, it gets more exploitation, gets more destruction, more all these categories that make the youth especially die in the working, you know, die in the police operation in Brazil, or dying or got locked up in the prison. So it's very, very important for people that are seeing this interview to understand that those problems are not problems exclusively made on Brazil, or made on Latin America, or made in Georgia. I think we must understand once for all that all those kind of things are intimately related on how you said, how the capitalist system is globally architected, you know, is globally functioning. So just to I think to understand how is this mobilization or organization of the people in Georgia are happening, because in Brazil we elected Lula last year, but is what we call the social neoliberalism, you know, and it's with a social questioning the social part of it, because all the same measures, economical measures that Bolsonaro did or the last governments did, they are just skipping it or getting worse. We are privatizing prisons in Brazil, privatizing parks, privatizing water, privatizing everything, so the private initiative can help to develop the country, or can help to develop the needs of the people. And that's why I think right now, especially the youth, the younglings they are interested about a new option. That's why I think they are also reviving the memory of Soviet Union. So
that's great.
I think that's a very important time for us to advance in our work, in our national, but especially in our international work of solidarity, but not only as solidarity as empty words like all the solidarity for the workers, but what we are actually doing it, you know, beyond this kind of organizations that only say those words. So I think to understand that how is this political movements are organized here in Georgia, especially after 1991, which I imagine that a lot of anti-communist speeches and practices and organizations rose a lot after this period, and how is nowadays?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so Yeah, I think everything you said is exactly it. This is not just a Brazil problem, it's not a Georgia problem, it's a capitalism problem everywhere. The Soviet Union is why it's so important to study it, because you can really learn so much about the good and the bad, and also a lot of the bad, why it happened, you know. How is it, you know, can you have socialism in this one part of the world while you have enemies at your door who want to destroy you, you know? Because even with the example of Brazil, like, if Lula did try to do something, he's blackmailed, he's, you know, he's taken out. Like, this is the problem with a lot of these liberal democracies, is that whenever you have any leftist or communist candidates even emerge, like they did to Greece, like literally, like, we will ruin you if you take anything against us. So like, at the end of the day, it's really difficult to sometimes see how that, through those methods of just winning election, and then, oh, now that we have a mandate from the people, we can do things, because there's global forces that are much stronger than the people of the country that elected you. And also the local reactionaries are trying to undermine and destroy you. So I think in the case of Georgia, it's like, it's exactly it. Like, you are part of this historical process of decommunization. The reactionary forces are really strong. Whenever, some of the processes that happened in Georgia where they criminalized communism is illegal here, started somewhere else, you know, started in the other post-Soviet countries, and they copy exact laws here. And there's a reason that neoliberalism and criminalization of communism happened the same time. They forbade progressive taxation through constitution, and they criminalized communism, you know? So they know that communism really is an alternative. That's why they must crush it. So they always do something for capitalism, to advance capitalism, and to make sure you don't have any memories of an alternative. They try to crush communism more. And this is why now they've also just tied it plainly to Russia. So now it's like a geopolitical spin. So if you're saying you're for pro-communism or you remember communism well, then all of a sudden you are a Russia-oriented person, which is backward, which is, you know, totalitarian, dictatorship, Putin is horrible, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so like, they try to make, and for them, a lot of the elites, the way they try to talk about communism is a geopolitical project of just being part of this giant geopolitical bloc. Nothing about the content, right? Which is the most important part. Like, who cares about the geopolitics? It's the content, right? And so, every way possible, communism has been, in their minds, tried to frame as a Russian thing, as a geopolitical project, as a totalitarian, anti-humanistic project, as an anti-European project. So someone like me comes along, and I think I have a lot of privilege because I'm Western in the sense that I grew up in the US. So I'm, you know, English speaker, so I kind of break their little brains, you know, because like, how can an English speaker in America be like pro-communism, you know, and not like pro-EU or the West, right? So it's like, what's happening, you know, because it's easy for them to shame, you know, a 70-year-old man who only speaks Russian as some kind of a nostalgic idiot who is just uneducated in the Western ways of why he likes communism, you know? And this is what they do, they shame them and they make them feel like their knowledge is not enough and they're somehow regressive and bad people, you know? So like, I attempt in every possible way, first of all, to take that stigma away, because it's really important to fight against some of this stigmatization of communism. And it's also interesting because it just gets, the farther away we are from communism, it's like 30 years after, and it's even getting stronger and stronger, this anti-communism stuff that they keep forcing on us. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, 30 years, it's been completely annihilated. Like, who are you fighting? Like, 30 years, not a semblance. And it's like, you're still trying to defeat communism, and that means it was something so strong, because 30 years after the Russian Revolution, Soviet Union had already won World War II, you know, and it was like wasn't talking, Stalin and no one else was just talking about how, you know, mean the feudalists were and like must destroy feudalism everywhere and never back to feudalism, you know, whatever, you know, the graffiti and stuff, right? They had already proven communism since they had completely rehauled and reshaped all of this entire gigantic region of the Soviet Union, gave people totally different like victories they've never seen, right? And even though it still was going to be a difficult period because it's post-war and so on, you reap the benefits in the 60s really of all that by having a grand time. I think the 60s and the 70s were, you know, the golden age, right, where you had everything. And so what happens here? You have 30 years and you have put nothing. You have given people nothing, just taken away. You have dispossessed them. So they're still fighting communism because people are still living in the communist homes that the communists gave them. You know, like they're still suspicious of people's loyalties here. You know, it's like they're afraid still that you might like this is where they fight the nostalgia, that you might turn on them. You know. So what kind of, it's like insecurity. I look at this, they're so insecure, you know? And so the movements, unfortunately, they're still shaped by a lot of the anti-communist rhetoric, but for even workers, every time we try to have like minimum wage or labor inspection, they would just say this is communist. And they call everything good communist here, so I'm like, this is great. Like, we're like, people should have a minimum wage. They're like, communism. Everyone's like, wait, but we do like them. Like, that's a good idea, you know? So by them like constantly fighting with us and calling the most elementary, you know, social reform communism, they actually make communism look better because it's so, you know. Of course, in the Europeans will say, no, this is European, not communism. This is European system, EU, they have minimum wage. But there's definitely like, there's a lot of movement in the sense that a lot of people, like I was recently, like I had gone to the EU, there was this Geórgia thing, we had event I was at, and I was just like, I just said like, I'm tired of like us having to learn from the EU all the time, like there's perpetual students, you know? Like we have a lot to teach you, like the Soviet Union has insane amounts. We have been on the front lines of class struggle, like Georgians have won incredible victories. We had, you know, Geórgia Republic in 1905 that had more progressive politics than most people have today, you know? One of the most like, you know, radical women and men being equal in 1905. We have tons of movements here. One of the biggest strikes to railroad strikes and so on, right? And Batumi's oil refinery strikes that changed the entire Russian, you know, empire, that planted the seeds for the Russian Revolution later, right? So we have been at the front of class struggle. Soviet Union has been more progressive than any other country in any kind of labor code, you know, any of that. So here they are coming in and teaching us things that we did better than them. You know, it's like, it's really, for me, it's like, it's my pride is hurt that they think they're smarter than us because they really have been told this. But it's not just me. I realized when I said like, we should teach you, a lot of people like messaged me and they were like, thank God you said this. It's like, there's a lot of anger and people don't fully know what is it that they don't like. And I think it's this paternalistic EU thing where it's like people are constantly telling you that you are regressive, we need to enlighten you, taking your trainings, teaching you stupid stuff, you know? So it's like, there's a lot of anger there of like, Georgians have been told to hate themselves, that they are a project that needs to be fixed, you know? It's like, we are constantly a starter up kind of thing where you have to, you know, shape and mold and whatever. It's a colonial
European perspective, right?
Yes, like colonial, like we are always behind. We're always one step or two or 10 behind, you know? And so, and then we always have these people who are like, oh, Georgians don't know anything. You can't even stand in a line. Like, how are we gonna get into Europe if you don't even understand on the line? You know, it's like, all the time. So you have Georgians within constantly telling you that you are uncivilized. And I notice how much this destroys people's self-confidence, you know? They make you feel small and they can take advantage of you, you know? So it's another thing that I think like a lot of the movements lack, like a lot of the workers, like and this is what we try to do in Solidarity Network and things that we do, is like increase people's confidence for their skills, like make them feel valued. You know, we try very much not to be hierarchical in the sense like everything is very, very hierarchical, make them like workers are still supposed to be looked down. Even as a union boss, I should be standing higher, you know, talking down to them. And this sort of equality is really missing in people's lives, you know, equality and self-confidence, because there always have these Europeans come in, or whoever comes in, or a boss comes in, and then the little people, you know, to be taught something, you know. And so that's challenging. Like my friend in the US told me that, you know, there's a movement called Black is Beautiful. And I was like, why would this movement even make sense? And, you know, it took me a while because I'm like, well, if you have like 500 years of white people telling Black people that their skin is horrible, that you should hate yourself for what you look like, you know, you do need a campaign to tell them that Black is beautiful, because they have been told 500 years of telling them white people are more beautiful, like their skin is better and they're better than you, you know. You do need that kind of uplift to make, to feel like you are not less, not inferior. And I think like Georgians similarly, in that colonial kind of making you hate yourself, we need more of this, that's like there's nothing wrong with you, you know, like you are not less than the Germans, you're not less than the French. And yet every step of the way they're told by everyone that they're just not good enough. And this really, if you don't think you deserve a better country, if you don't think you deserve a better workplace, if you don't think you deserve a better future, you're not going to fight for workers' rights, you're not going to fight for socialism, you're not going to fight for communism, you're not going to fight for anything. Because they've been telling you don't really deserve much because you are not good enough. The only time Georgians like their country, like the liberals, you know, they're all self-hating Georgians, right? They hate themselves more than anyone. They hate their country, they hate everybody. They're the most nationalist ones who hate themselves and others. Only time they liked it was when European flags were being like, you know, there was like a protest and like the government was like water cannoning and they were like fighting with the European flags, and that was everywhere in Europe. They put these pictures up of Georgians like behind the EU flags, and I think that's the only time they ever felt happy about being Georgian. Oh, finally, it's for the outer gaze, you know, like Europeans were like, oh, these people are so amazing, like look at them, they're fighting for us. Like, you know, like this is the only time. This is sick. There's some kind of a twisted ideology, like some kind of religious fundamentalism of Europeanness, whiteness, that is sick to me. It is a white supremacy where we are never European enough, and all we want to do, and this is why actually we don't really look at Armenia, Azerbaijan, you know, they're less white than us. It's like our thing. Yeah, and so if you see like the EU candidates, right, it's like, it's all here, and then like we're here, and it's like fine. We've tried to make it in here, you know. We try to be part of the Europe, the winners club, the white people's club, where then we can feel like we're worthy. You know, if they just accept us into their club, we will be white, and it's gonna be like so much better. And this makes you not have solidarity with people of color. This makes you not have solidarity with the Global South, because you're trying to get the hell away from the Global South because you're trying to be in the winners club, right? So if you look at voting patterns in UN or whatever, Georgia's trying to just constantly vote with EU, vote with the US. Who do you side with? You're gonna keep siding with Europeans over anything. If Israel, Palestine, you're gonna side with Israel, right? You're gonna keep siding because you want to be in the winners club. And that takes a huge effect on how people see themselves, right? If we're doing all this just so we can then help oppress others, you know, it's like, you just want to be in an elite club so that you can say like, oh, we're the elites, and now you can together, you know, like make the rest of the world feel inferior and in every possible way disenfranchise them. Like, that's not a project that's worthwhile to me, you know. For me, I think like Georgia workers, everyone else would benefit from solidarity with the global south, solidarity with people. And that's what the Soviet Union used to really be able to do in a way that never been able to reach that same level. Like even the books that we used to read, they used to like publish like African American writers. You know, they used to publish books from India, from other countries, and people used to read them. Now they have American trash only. They translate books, the autobiography of Henry Kissinger, you know, they translate books of, you know, how to be a bitch by whatever, or something like, you know, some kind of like a
the Barack Obama
American,
biography,
something like, you know, some pop culture bullshit from the US. They don't translate novels and books now from Latin America. They don't translate Brazil. They don't translate from India. They don't translate from Africa. You know, they don't translate that. They don't care. So it's all, like even every possible way that we are being shaped now is only through European lens. And even that we're told we're not, we're a project and we may never get there, you know. So this means that we have to do a lot of work to create movements that are not just going to be European centric in my view.
I think that's very important because this gives the shape of our struggle, our class struggle, especially as an international class struggle that is really attached to the idea of anti-colonization by other terms, like fighting these foreign companies and fighting these kind of projects that, in a way, we saw that I saw that during these 2 or 3 weeks here in Georgia and Armenia, that completely collapsed the countries. That we saw all those factories abandoned, all those structures completely offering poor services, and people sad and people you know feeling low. And I think it's very important for me this experience, and I think this interview is like the cherry of the cake, you know, to seal the experience in the way that we can perceive that if we don't try to build this project, to build this autonomy and also build this self-esteem about what kind of society that we want, what kind of society we deserve as workers, as people from the global south or people that are getting colonized, we won't get anywhere. I think that's the most important thing they did. They collapsed all the possibilities of hope, all the alternatives. Like you know, I think it's not a coincidence that a woman as Margaret Thatcher got so much culture in a Western civilization. Like there is no alternative.
Yeah.
You know, so I think this was
absolutely
really important, and I want to thank you very much for this.
Much, actually, this was great that you all came as well, because the fact that even you're like, we don't have this kind of metro and we don't have this kind of infrastructure, and it's I think a lot of the Georgians hearing you are shocked as well because they don't know. They don't appreciate all the amazing infrastructure they have and they had, because they can't imagine that the rest of the world isn't better off than us. People are convinced that everyone is better off than us. You know, just probably Brazilians think this similarly.
Off the records, so the interview ends here, and off the records, just for the making of material, we went to a restaurant in Armenia, to eat some fish, and I made a joke about eating caviar. And it was like a communist eating caviar, and I was like with a piece of bread.
You didn't know that we actually ate caviar.
No,
Please
I
tell
knew.
this to the camera, because Brazilians are saying that we are lying, that people eat caviar in the Soviet Union, that we are crazy.
Yeah, please, not a making of material anymore, just a material now.
Okay. Actually, my aunt, who's 86, who I told you is an anti-communist, her dream is to eat caviar again. So actually, growing up, you know,
I'm laughing in despair. Please continue.
yeah, which I find so funny, because she's this anti-communist and doesn't seem to realize that she used to have caviar, just, you know, boxes and boxes of them when we were younger, when I was younger, when she was younger as well. And like in the mornings, my family would make me breakfast of bread, butter, and caviar, because there's so much, and I would be like, oh, caviar again, you know, like just seriously, like so sick of it, you know. Like every table, supra, like for what we call dinner, like dinner table, always you have to have both red and black caviar. Black caviar is the more fancy, the ones I like more, but always had two colors. Always, just constantly had caviar, you know. And then we moved to the U.S. and then the collapse of Soviet Union happened. Then we moved to the U.S. and caviar, we find out, is just like crazy luxurious commodity. I didn't know this, so of course we couldn't afford in the U.S. And I remember when I was 12, I begged my mother for my birthday present to buy me caviar. I can't believe she spent
Oh my God.
like $100 or something and bought me this tiny caviar as a birthday present for me. You know, like this woman who made barely like $5 an hour, you know. She worked and saved for me to like remember the taste. And when I came back here, just everywhere, no one knows, the kids don't even know caviar anymore. You know, I'm like confused because it's like such a normal part. And then my aunt is like, I dream of caviar, you know, like she's like, that's my favorite food, and I used to have it all the time, you know. And so now I'm afraid she will die and never to have caviar, you know, and she's the anti-communist one, you know. I'm like confused. But yeah, this is
I will bring her next time. In Russia it's expensive, but not so
really?
expensive.
Oh, amazing.
I bring you a
Amazing.
small.
You all heard that, right? Rodrigo is promising behind the camera, so it's a promise.
Really, I have this liberal friend. She's from Samara, which is in the Volga. Volga is the region where the fish, the sturgeon lives. And she's Russian, crazy liberal. And she always tells, in my youth, I used to eat caviar with a spoon.
Yeah, seriously. So good. I love caviar.
So you are not such a crazy, detached from reality Brazilian that's...
Yeah, it's actually a debate that we must do, because as we said, cultural war. They all made us think that caviar is like a gold mine or a diamond thing, but it's not. It was accessible in socialism. Guess what?
Oh, it was so good too.
Yeah. Sopo.
So I want to thank you.
And everything. Thank
Sopo,
you.
because really we have there is a liberal channel in Brazil, quite large, Spotniks.
Yeah.
And they have, I didn't know, one of our visitors told me, they have this whole video about how Georgia is an economic success and an example
fucking insane.
Of
That's
liberalism
so
that went in
That's
the right
literally
way,
crazy.
and how Georgia is amazing. Spotniks has a video about how Georgia is a case of success of
my
liberalism. And well,
That sounds literally crazy.
so that's the kind of brainwashing we have in Brazil right now.
Yeah, but I really want to thank you, because sharing this experience is very important. Not only for me as a communist, but as well to all the people that want to know more about those processes and all the historical background. So I really want to appreciate, and also I ask you to, if you want to make an advertisement about your podcast or social networks or anything to people to get along, please make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, I think if you speak English, please go to Reimagining Soviet Georgia. It's found on every platform. It's our podcast where we delve into many different parts about Soviet Union and Soviet Georgia in particular. Also, you can find us on Twitter at Reimagining Soviet Georgia, and also mine is Soap Jap. Write to me if you have any questions. I think it's really important for people to, hopefully if you speak English, listen to our podcast. We have a great healthcare episode, healthcare in Yugoslavia, in Georgia, and in East Germany coming up.
Really nice.
Yeah, so like even that, like so many things are just really interesting, and we're just kind of expanding more and more, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, no, I
Thank you so
thank you. É isso aí, gente. Gostaram? Excelente. Não esqueça de curtir, comentar, se inscrever, seguir as redes da Sopo, ouvir o podcast. E é isso, né? Lutar por um mundo aí em que as pessoas tenham acesso ao caviar. Um beijo. É nóis.